engagement in folk songs, folk dances, display of attires, display of food has been the most common affair. The center has also organized seminars at the college level as well as the national level. And in these seminars, we have focused on dissemination of knowledge on work culture, responsibility towards common property, the impact of foreign culture on Naga society and Naga culture, and also balancing tradition and modernity. Another important activity of the Culture Studies Center of the college is the conduct of life skill activities. So this we have started in the most recent years. So we have covered workshops, covering areas such as basket making, bamboo crafts, jewelry making, cultural motifs painting, and also simple things such as machete sharpening. We are hopeful that in the years to come, the center will be able to expand and extend into areas guiding students into field work and also similar research-related activities. Our unique languages, our beliefs, habits, and practices, our relationship with our territory, all make up for our indigenousness.
Let us not talk about other side, but when we look at our college rooms, toilet, washrooms, I'm sure you all have experienced it. That is our culture. Do we really adopt a good culture which can give us a good health? Do we adopt a culture which can give us a future prospects? Do we adopt a new culture which give us to work hard? Today is a day for us to re-examine ourselves. Yes, I agree, we fail in our parts to do some certain things, but we fail to adopt a culture which can contribute to our good health, which can contribute to our brighter future. As we are observing Cultural Day today, without changing our mind, without changing our lifestyle, it is useless. So now I'm challenging you. Yesterday, okay, you did it. Forget. We have forgiven you. Tomorrow, we don't know what's coming. But the time is now to take a decision that from this Cultural Day, 11th Cultural Day 2024, I have decided that I will not eat chewing pound within the college campus, not speak to the wall, not speak to the public place, not speak to the toilet, to dirty, to affect psychological effects to others. If we can take a decision, then this Cultural Day we can start a new beginning.
Engaging with indigeneity. I struggle a little bit with this topic because I have been involved with indigenous peoples movement for 30 years. We were some of the first people who went to United Nations and the World Council of Indigenous People. But when you say engaging with indigeneity, it's slightly different. And I remember when I was a speaker at the NSF conference, they gave me a topic which is very intellectual type. And I didn't quite understand the topic. But I was a professor, so I pretend to understand it because I was a bit shy. So I went up and talked about this topic completely off the subject, and they all enjoyed it. And I came down and said to the office bearers president, said, look, I didn't quite understand the topic. Where did you get this topic? And none of them knew about the topic. they copied it from someone, either some program in Oxford or Harvard, which they had no idea what it was. So both of us, they didn't understand, I didn't understand we were talking about it. So I hope I won't go too off the indigeneity, but I will also talk about a little bit about indigenous people's movement, which I've been involved a lot. And that is also part of the indigeneity, very difficult word to say. First of all, there are two meanings. One is the literal meaning of indigenous, and the other is a political meaning of indigenous people. The literal meaning is, you are the original people of that land, therefore, all the Nagas in Nagaland are indigenous people of Nagaland, and Miyas and few other from North India, Bihari, Toshali, they are not indigenous people here. So that is the literal meaning. In other words, every human being is an indigenous person somewhere and non-indigenous somewhere else. In other words, an Englishman is an indigenous person in England. A Norwegian girl is an indigenous person in Norway. But politically, they don't fall under the indigenous category. Why? I'll tell you. The word indigenous, as described by the United Nations and by political scientists and anthropologists, is a person of an original person of the land, but the political, cultural, historical, and the land has been taken by somebody else. So indigenous people in Australia are the Aboriginal people, the black people. But the white people who came and ruled them, the British mostly, 98% of them, they are non-indigenous people. In America, Apaches, Dakota, whatever, Cherokee, they are indigenous people, the First Nations. But the Americans, as we know, are not indigenous people. They came from Europe, okay? So, in a United Nations, these people are classified as indigenous people. In other words, the English and the German and the Indians and the Chinese cannot be called indigenous people in the United Nations because they have their own nation states that they control, and they control somebody else. So, in that category, Nagas fits in very well as indigenous people, both politically and literally. Literally, we are here, we are born here, but politically also because we do not have control of our own affairs. In other words, there's a thing called Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which allows an Indian army to kill a Naga if they suspect, reasonable suspicion that they are underground, so to say. And they can come and occupy the best portion of the land, Assam Rifle, and said, we'll have our camp here. Although it belongs to the Kohima villages, they can't say anything. In Mezipema, the best portion belongs to the Assam Rifle camp. Sakove is massive land, they just occupied. So they're occupied everywhere. Therefore, politically, we can have the right to say you are indigenous people and go to United Nations. Now, the indigenous people movement, as I said, I've been involved for 30 years, and it has a little history. In 1925 and 23 and 25, before United Nations came, there was a thing called League of Nations. In that, the Aboriginals of Australia, the First Nations of America have presented this case of indigenous people. But it fizzled out. It was only 30 years ago or so, in the 1980s, that these anthropologists, politicians, diplomats, they started going into the United Nations and lobbying me. It was at that time that as a young man like you, I started going to United Nations and going to the International Council of Indigenous People, World Council of Indigenous People. Now, at that time, it was very rare to be there. And when I went there, I had to be paid by United Nations. My airfare has to be paid by them, and my accommodation has to be paid by them. But nowadays, everybody and anybody can go to United Nations if you have money, if you can pay your airfare. Only last month, no, this month, Global Naga Forum sent a man called James Puchuri, a Puchuri fellow, to speak for the Nagas on behalf of the Nagas. And all we did was, we got two American guys, one Father Abraham Lota and Professor Kohima Nagas in America, to pay his airfare and paid his hotel bills, and he went and he spoke very well, which I will come a little bit later on. Now, the indigenous affairs and indigenous movement has also becoming a little bit of a drama as usual. When you go to United Nations, everyone is wearing a costume. Okay, the First Nation are wearing the costume, the Aboriginal, the Maoris, which are about 150 kilograms, 6-footer about this size. They come with a costume, and it's all very colorful. And the interesting thing is, it has become part of your passport. So when I go to United Nations, I don't wear like this. I put on a headgear, a little bit of funny thing, and I'm accepted more or less. So my friend James Puchuri, who is now working in Thailand, he normally dressed like this. But when he spoke in United Nations, he was more like a joker. Half was Puchuri, half cognac, and something out there, and something here, and something here. I thought he was a comedian. But behind him were all these indigenous tribal people with all feathers and beads and so forth. So I thought it was fun, part of the fun. And the anthropologists who are always in the United Nations always remark about that. And it's